My hands were shaking as I stared at my phone screen, watching my entire reputation crumble in real time. The Instagram story had my name plastered across it in bold letters, but everything written beneath was a complete lie. Tyler cheated on me with 3 different guys behind my back. Thought you all should know what kind of person he really is. Mason's perfectly curated profile picture smiled back at me mockingly. The same smile that used to make my heart race, now making my stomach turn. I couldn't breathe. This was the same Mason who had broken up with me 3 months ago, claiming he needed space to figure himself out, only to start flaunting his new relationship with his secretary Jennifer 2 weeks later. The same Mason who used to whisper sweet promises in my ear about our future together, who said I was the only one who understood him, who made me believe I was special. The university hallway felt like a tunnel closing in on me. Every step I took, I could feel eyes following my movement. Whispers echoed off the walls like ghosts haunting me. Isn't that the guy Mason posted about? I heard he was sleeping around the whole time. Poor Mason, he's so much better off without him. Each comment felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I pushed through the crowd of students, keeping my head down, trying to make it to the bathroom before the tears started falling. Reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes, skin pale as paper, hair disheveled from running my fingers through it anxiously all morning. I can't let him win, I whispered to my reflection, but even I didn't believe the conviction in my voice. The bathroom door opened and 2 guys from my sociology class walked in, their conversation stopping abruptly when they saw me. The silence was deafening. They exchanged glances, clearly recognizing me from Mason's post, before quickly finishing their business and leaving without a word. I was alone again, but somehow felt more exposed than ever. My phone buzzed with notifications. Comments on Mason's post, messages from friends asking if it was true, missed calls from my roommate probably wanting to check on me. I couldn't deal with any of it. I turned the phone face down and gripped the sink until my knuckles turned white. But then, in the quiet of that bathroom, a different kind of thought crept into my mind. Mason's father, Ryan Harrison. I'd met him several times during family gatherings when Mason and I were dating. He was nothing like his son, 42 years old with silver-streaked hair that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. Broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored suits, a deep voice that commanded attention in any room, and an intelligence that Mason had never inherited. Where Mason was impulsive and shallow, Ryan was thoughtful and profound. Where Mason threw tantrums when he didn't get his way, Ryan handled conflicts with mature composure. I remembered the way Ryan's eyes would crinkle when he smiled genuinely, so different from Mason's practiced social media grin. There was a depth there, a complexity that had always intrigued me during those awkward family dinners. Tyler, honey, are you okay in there? My best friend Chloe's voice jolted me back to reality. She must have heard about the posts and come looking for me. I unlocked the door and let her in, immediately breaking down in her arms. He's destroying me, Chloe, I sobbed into her shoulder. Everyone believes him. How do I even fight something like this? She held me tighter, running her fingers through my hair the way she always did when I was upset. We'll figure this out, she said firmly. Mason can't just lie about you and get away with it. There has to be something we can do. But even as she spoke, I'd hear the uncertainty in her voice. In a world where social media rumors spread faster than truth, what chance did I really have? I pulled back and wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. Chloe, what do you know about Ryan Harrison, Mason's father? She looked at me confused, probably wondering why I was thinking about him at a time like this. Mr. Harrison? He's a successful lawyer, divorced, seems nice enough. Why? There was something in her tone that suggested she suspected where my thoughts were heading. Just curious, I said, but my mind was already forming a plan. Maybe I couldn't fight Mason directly, but what if there was another way? What if I could make him understand what it felt like to have someone you trust betray you? The idea was dangerous, probably stupid, but as I stood there feeling powerless, it was the only thing that gave me any sense of control. Tyler, whatever you're thinking, be careful, Chloe warned, reading my expression with the accuracy that came from years of friendship. Revenge has a way of backfiring. But I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. At least not entirely. I was thinking about those conversations I'd had with Ryan during family gatherings, How he'd actually listened when I talked about my art classes or my dreams of traveling to Europe. How he'd ask thoughtful follow-up questions instead of just waiting for his turn to speak like Mason always did. That evening, I sat in my dorm room staring at Ryan's contact information in my phone. Mason had added it months ago during some family emergency and I'd never deleted it. My finger hovered over his name, my heart pounding as I crafted and deleted a dozen different messages. Finally, I settled on something simple. "Hi, Mr. Harrison, it's Tyler. I was hoping we could meet for coffee sometime soon. There's something important I need to discuss with you about Mason. I know this might seem strange, but I could really use some advice from someone with your perspective." I stared at the message for 10 minutes before hitting send, my stomach churning with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. What was I doing? This could backfire spectacularly. But as I sat there waiting for a response, I realized I didn't care about the risks anymore. Mason had declared war on my reputation. Maybe it was time I fought back with weapons he'd never see coming. The response came faster than I expected. "Of course, Tyler. I'm sorry to hear you're going through something difficult. How about tomorrow evening at 7 p.m.? There's a nice coffee shop called Grind downtown. We can talk privately there." My heart stopped. He'd said yes. Not only that, but his message was warm, concerned, nothing like the cold dismissal I might have expected. I typed back quickly before I could lose my nerve. "That sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison. I really appreciate this." As I put my phone down, I caught my reflection in my laptop screen. For the first time since this morning, I looked like myself again. There was color in my cheeks, a spark in my eyes that had been missing all day. Tomorrow evening couldn't come fast enough. I had no idea that this single decision would change everything. Not just my plan for revenge against Mason, but my entire understanding of what love could feel like with the right person. I arrived at Grind Coffee 15 minutes early, my nerves making it impossible to sit still in my dorm room any longer. The coffee shop was exactly the kind of place I'd imagined Ryan would choose. Sophisticated but not pretentious, with warm lighting and comfortable leather chairs scattered throughout. I'd changed my outfit 3 times, finally settling on a navy blue button-down shirt and dark jeans, wanting to look mature but not like I was trying too hard. But Ryan was already there when I walked in, and the sight of him made my breath catch in my throat. He was sitting at a corner table typing something on his phone, completely absorbed in what he was doing. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves slightly, giving him a more relaxed appearance than I was used to seeing at family gatherings. When he looked up and spotted me, his face broke into a genuine smile that made my stomach flip. "Tyler," he said, standing to greet me with a firm handshake that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for reaching out. You look stressed. Please sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" His voice was even more commanding in this intimate setting, and I found myself nodding mutely as he went to the counter to order. I watched him interact with the barista, noting how polite he was, how he remembered to ask for extra foam on my cappuccino even though I'd only mentioned that preference once during a family dinner months ago. "So," he said, settling back into his chair and giving me his full attention, "tell me what's going on with Mason. Your message sounded serious." I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, showing him the screenshots I'd taken of all Mason's social media posts. The Instagram story, the Facebook comments, the Twitter threads where he'd encouraged his friends to share their own Tyler horror stories that were completely fabricated. Ryan's expression grew darker with each image, his jaw tightening in a way that reminded me he was a lawyer accustomed to fighting battles. "Tyler, this is completely unacceptable," he said, his voice taking on the same authoritative tone I'd heard him use during important phone calls at family events. "These are serious accusations, and if they're false, which I suspect they are, this could constitute defamation." "They are false, Mr. Harrison," I said quickly. "I never cheated on Mason. Not once. He's the one who left me for his secretary Jennifer. Said he needed space to figure himself out. Then 2 weeks later they were all over each other's social media." Ryan leaned forward and I caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made me want to breathe deeper. "I believe you," he said simply. "And please call me Ryan. Mr. Harrison makes me feel ancient." The casual intimacy of using his first name sent a shiver down my spine that I tried to ignore. "Ryan," I repeated, testing how it felt on my tongue. Why do you believe me? You barely know me. He was quiet for a moment, studying my face in a way that made me feel exposed but not uncomfortable. Because I've been watching how you and Mason interact for months during family gatherings. You were always the one trying to smooth over his outbursts. The one who remembered what everyone liked to drink. The one who asked thoughtful questions about people's lives. Mason, he paused, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. Mason has always been selfish. It's my fault, probably. His mother and I divorced when he was young, and I overcompensated by giving him everything he wanted. You don't have to apologize for him, I said softly. Mason is an adult. He makes his own choices. Generous of you to say, considering what he's putting you through. Ryan reached across the table and placed his hand over mine briefly. Just a moment of contact, but it sent electricity shooting up my arm. Let me handle this. Mason needs to learn that there are consequences for his actions. We ordered food, sandwiches, and pastries that we barely touched because we were too engrossed in conversation. Ryan told me about his divorce, how he'd thrown himself into work to cope with the loneliness, how he'd watched Mason become more entitled and difficult as the years passed. He spoke about his travels for work, the cases that kept him up at night, his love for classical music and old movies. What about you? He asked, leaning back in his chair with his coffee cup cradled in both hands. Tell me something about Tyler that I wouldn't know from family dinners. I found myself opening up in ways I never had with Mason. I told him about my art classes, how I painted late at night when the world was quiet and my thoughts could flow freely onto canvas. I shared my dreams of traveling to Europe, not just as a tourist but to study the masters in person, to understand how they captured light and shadow in ways that still took my breath away. I'd love to see your paintings sometime, Ryan said, and there was something in his voice that made the offer feel like more than polite interest. Really? I asked, suddenly shy. They're not very good. I'm still learning. I doubt that, he replied, and the conviction in his voice made me blush. You have an artist's way of seeing the world. I noticed that about you months ago. The way you observe people, the way you describe things. There's poetry in it. No one had ever talked to me like that. Mason's compliments had always been surface level. You look hot, or nice shirt. But Ryan was seeing something deeper, something I wasn't even sure I saw in myself. The conversation flowed so naturally that I was shocked when Ryan checked his watch and announced it was nearly 9 o'clock. We'd been talking for over 2 hours, and it felt like minutes. I should get you back to campus, he said. But there was reluctance in his voice that matched what I was feeling. Unless, would you like to take a walk first? It's such a nice evening. I nodded eagerly, not ready for this magical evening to end. We left the coffee shop together and Ryan gestured toward his car. A sleek black BMW that looked expensive but not flashy. I can walk, I started to say, but he was already opening the passenger door for me. Nonsense. It's late, and I'd feel better knowing you got back safely. The interior of his car was immaculate, leather seats that smelled like his cologne, classical music playing softly through premium speakers, everything arranged with the same attention to detail I'd noticed about his appearance. As he pulled out of the parking space, I found myself studying his profile in the dim light, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands looked confident and capable on the steering wheel. Tyler, he said suddenly, his voice softer than it had been all evening. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you okay? Really? I know Mason's posts have probably made life difficult for you. He glanced over at me briefly before focusing back on the road. I can't imagine how violated you must feel. The genuine concern in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. Honestly, I've been better. It's hard when people believe lies about you. When you feel like you can't defend yourself without looking desperate. You're not desperate, he said firmly. You're handling this with more grace than most people would. He pulled into a parking space near the campus entrance but didn't immediately get out. Instead, he turned to face me, and in the intimate space of the car I was acutely aware of how close we were. Ryan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, can I ask you something now? Anything. Why did you agree to meet with me tonight? Really? You could have just told Mason to take down his posts and left it at that. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, His voice was rough with something I couldn't identify. Because when I saw you at family dinners, I saw someone who was too good for my son. Someone who deserved better than Mason's careless treatment. And because he paused, his eyes meeting mine in the darkness. Because I've been thinking about you more than I should, and I wanted an excuse to spend time with you. My heart stopped. The air between us felt charged, dangerous, full of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider. Ryan, I know it's complicated, he said quickly. I know the age difference, the history with Mason. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea. But Tyler, I haven't felt this interested in getting to know someone in years. Would you like to have dinner with me this weekend? Just us, somewhere we can talk without worrying about who might see us. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was madness. Dating my ex-boyfriend's father was a recipe for disaster. But looking into Ryan's eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, feeling the way my heart raced when he said my name, rationality seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. Yes, I whispered. I'd like that very much. His smile in response was radiance, transforming his entire face. Saturday night? I'll pick you up at 7. As I walked back to my dorm, my head spinning with everything that had happened, I realized that my plan for revenge against Mason had already evolved into something else entirely. This wasn't about hurting Mason anymore. This was about the possibility of something real, something I'd never experienced before. I fell asleep that night with Ryan's voice echoing in my mind. And for the first time since Mason's posts had gone live, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made it impossible to sit still. I'd spent the entire day obsessing over what to wear, finally settling on black dress pants and a deep green button-down shirt that Chloe insisted brought out my eyes. I'd showered twice, changed my hair 3 different ways, and applied just enough cologne to be noticeable without being overwhelming. Ryan had texted me earlier to let me know he'd made reservations at Rosewood Restaurant, the most upscale dining establishment in town, the kind of place I'd only seen from the outside while walking past with friends. My stomach was doing gymnastics as I waited by the campus entrance, watching expensive cars pull up to collect other students for their Saturday night dates. When Ryan's BMW pulled up, I felt my breath catch in my throat. He stepped out wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, his silver hair styled impeccably, looking every inch the successful lawyer he was. But it was his smile when he saw me that made my knees weak, warm, genuine, with just a hint of nervousness that made him seem more human and less intimidating. "You look incredible," he said as he opened the passenger door for me, and the way he said it made me believe he meant it. His hand brushed mine as I settled into the car, sending familiar sparks up my arm that I was beginning to crave. The drive to Rosewood was filled with comfortable conversation about our weeks, but I could sense an underlying tension, not uncomfortable but anticipatory, like we were both aware that tonight was different from our coffee meeting. This felt like a real date with all the implications that carried. Rosewood Restaurant was even more impressive inside than out. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. The maître greeted Ryan by name and led us to a corner table that felt intimate and private, surrounded by soft jazz music and the quiet murmur of other diners' conversations. "Mr. Harrison, your usual table," the maître d' said with professional warmth. "Will you be having your regular wine tonight?" "Actually, let's try something different tonight," Ryan replied, glancing at me with a small smile. "Tonight feels like a night for new experiences." As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but notice how out of place I felt in this sophisticated environment. "Ryan, this place is amazing, but I have to ask, isn't it expensive? I mean, I'm just a college student." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his, the contact sending my heart racing. "Tyler, please don't worry about that. I invited you here because I wanted to take you somewhere special, somewhere that matches how I see you. Besides," he added with a playful grin, "successful lawyers have to spend their money on something." The waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations, and I felt completely out of my depth. Ryan seemed to sense my discomfort and smoothly took charge, ordering wine and suggesting dishes while making sure to ask what I preferred. His confidence was reassuring rather than domineering, and I found myself relaxing into the luxury of being taken care of. "So," Ryan said once we'd ordered, "I have some good news. Mason removed all his social media posts about you." He paused, swirling his wine glass thoughtfully. However, he wasn't particularly happy when I explained exactly why he needed to take them down. "What did you tell him?" I asked, genuinely curious about how that conversation had gone. The truth that his posts were defamatory and could have legal consequences. But I also told him that his behavior was disappointing and that he'd lost my respect. Ryan's expression grew serious. "I've been too lenient with Mason over the years, making excuses for his selfishness. Seeing how he treated you was a wake-up call." I felt a surge of gratitude mixed with something deeper. "Thank you. I mean that. You didn't have to get involved, but you did anyway." "Of course I did," he replied, his voice soft. "Tyler, I need to be honest with you about something. When I agreed to meet you for coffee, I told myself it was just to help resolve the situation with Mason. But that wasn't entirely true." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" Ryan looked down at his hands, suddenly seeming younger and more vulnerable. "I mean that I've been thinking about you for months. During family gatherings, I found myself looking forward to seeing you, to hearing your thoughts on things. You have this way of listening, really listening, that's rare in people of any age. And your intelligence, your kindness." He looked back up at me, his eyes intense. "I was attracted to you long before Mason treated you so poorly." The restaurant seemed to fade away around us as his words sank in. "You were attracted to me, but I was dating Mason, which is why I never said anything, never acted on it." Ryan said quickly, "It wouldn't have been appropriate. But Tyler, you have to know that you deserved so much better than how Mason treated you. You deserved someone who appreciated your depth, your creativity, your generous heart." I felt tears prick at my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being truly seen by someone. "Ryan, I need to tell you something too. Those family dinners, the whole time I was dating Mason, I kept finding myself wishing I could have real conversations like the ones we're having now. Mason never asked me about my art, never wanted to hear about my dreams or fears. But you did, because those things matter," Ryan said firmly. "They're what make you who you are." Our food arrived, but neither of us seemed particularly interested in eating. The conversation flowed from topic to topic: his travels for work, my favorite painters, his regrets about his marriage, my fears about the future. He told me about winning a difficult case earlier that week, and I found myself genuinely proud of his success. When I mentioned a painting I'd been working on but was frustrated with, he offered to look at it with fresh eyes, not judge, but to understand what I was trying to express. "Age really doesn't matter to me," Ryan said suddenly during a lull in conversation. "I know that might sound like something a man my age says to justify dating someone younger, but I mean it. When I'm talking to you, I don't think about the years between us. I think about how you make me laugh, how you challenge my thinking, how comfortable I feel in your presence." My cheeks flushed with warmth. "I feel the same way. When we're together, you don't feel like Mason's father or some intimidating older man. You just feel like Ryan. Like someone I want to know everything about." "Everything?" he asked with a raised eyebrow and a teasing smile. "Everything," I confirmed, then felt bold enough to add, "and I want you to know everything about me too." The intensity of his gaze made my skin tingle. I'd like that very much. By the time we finished dinner, the restaurant had emptied considerably and we realized we'd been there for over 3 hours. "I should probably get you back," Ryan said reluctantly, "but I'm not ready for this evening to end." "Neither am I," I admitted. "Would you like to take a walk? There's a beautiful park near here and the weather's perfect." We drove to Riverside Park, where tree-lined paths wound along the water under soft streetlights. The night air was cool but not cold, perfect for walking close together while talking softly. Ryan offered me his suit jacket when he noticed me shiver slightly, and wearing it felt intimate and protective. "Tyler," he said as we stopped by the water's edge, "I have to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay? Is this what's happening between us? Is it real for you? Or am I just a convenient way to get back at Mason?" His vulnerability in asking the question made my heart ache. I turned to face him fully, wanting him to see the sincerity in my expression. Ryan, if this was just about Mason, I would have slept with you that first night and made sure he found out. But that's not what I want. What I want is to keep having conversations like tonight. I want to learn what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night, what you dream about. I want you to see my paintings and tell me honestly what you think. I paused, gathering courage for what I was about to say. I want to fall in love with you, properly and completely. Ryan's hands came up to cup my face gently, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. Tyler, I think I'm already falling in love with you. Is that crazy? If it is, then we're both crazy, I whispered. Can I kiss you? He asked softly. Instead of answering with words, I rose up on my toes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if we were both afraid of crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But then Ryan's arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and launching into space at the same time. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Ryan rested his forehead against mine. This changes everything, he murmured. I know, I replied, but I don't want to go back to how things were before. Neither do I, he said, kissing me again, softer this time but no less meaningful. As we walked back to his car hand in hand, I realized that what had started as a plan for revenge had transformed into something I'd never experienced before. The possibility of real adult love, with someone who saw me completely and loved what he saw. The drive back to campus was quiet but comfortable, filled with stolen glances and the lingering warmth of new love. When Ryan walked me to my dorm entrance, he kissed me goodnight with a tenderness that made my toes curl. Sweet dreams, Tyler, he whispered against my lips. As I watched him drive away, I knew that everything in my life had just changed forever. And for the first time since Mason had tried to destroy my reputation, I felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led me to this moment. The weeks following our dinner at Rosewood became a beautiful, terrifying dance of secrecy. Ryan and I found ways to see each other almost daily. Lunch meetings at his law office where I'd sit in the leather chair across from his mahogany desk, pretending to discuss college career advice while we shared stolen glances and lingering touches. Evening coffee runs to quiet cafes across town where we could hold hands without fear of recognition. Weekend visits to art museums where Ryan would stand behind me as I explained different painting techniques, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered how beautiful I looked in the gallery lighting. I feel like a teenager sneaking around, I confessed one afternoon as we sat in his office. The door closed and the blinds drawn. Ryan had ordered Chinese takeout, and we were sharing lo mein straight from the containers like we'd done this 1,000 times before. Do you mind it? He asked, reaching across his desk to brush a strand of hair from my forehead. The simple touch made my skin tingle, and I leaned into his palm when he cupped my cheek. Not really, I admitted. There's something exciting about having this just be ours for now. No outside opinions, no judgments, just us figuring out what this is. Ryan's smile was soft and warm. I've never felt this way about anyone, Tyler. Not even with my ex-wife when we were first married. What we have, it's different, deeper. Those words should have scared me. The intensity of what was developing between us was unlike anything I'd experienced with Mason or anyone else. But instead of fear, I felt a sense of rightness. Like all the pieces of my life were finally clicking into place. His downtown loft became our sanctuary. The first time he brought me there, I was overwhelmed by how perfectly it reflected who he was. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive but tasteful art on the walls, bookshelves filled with legal texts mixed with classic literature and art history books. Everything was organized with the same attention to detail I'd noticed about his appearance, but it felt lived in rather than sterile. Make yourself at home, he'd said that first evening, loosening his tie as he moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. I hope you don't mind cooking together. I find it relaxing after long days in court. Watching Ryan cook was like watching performance art. He moved with confidence and precision, seasoning pasta water while simultaneously preparing a sauce, opening a bottle of wine with one hand while stirring with the other. When he asked me to set the table, I discovered he had actual cloth napkins and wine glasses that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. This is incredible, I said, gesturing around the apartment as we sat down to eat. I feel like I should be more intimidated by all this. Why? Ryan asked, Genuinely curious. Because I'm a broke college student eating ramen most nights, and you're this successful lawyer with art on your walls and a wine collection. Ryan set down his fork and reached across the small dining table to take my hand. Tyler, material things don't impress me about people. What impresses me is kindness, intelligence, creativity, things you have in abundance. Besides, he added with a teasing smile, I happen to find your determination to survive on dollar ramen quite admirable. It shows resourcefulness. After dinner, he put on soft jazz and we slow danced in his living room, the city lights twinkling below us like stars. I haven't felt this happy in years, he murmured against my hair as we swayed together. Neither have I whispered back, meaning it completely. But secrets have a way of creating their own pressure, especially in small college towns where everyone knows everyone. I started noticing Mason watching me more carefully during the few classes we shared, his eyes narrowing whenever I seemed particularly happy or distracted. My friends began commenting on my improved mood and mysterious absence from our usual hangout spots. Tyler, you've been glowing lately, Chloe observed one afternoon as we grabbed coffee between classes. There's definitely someone new in your life. Come on. Spill. Who is he? I deflected as best I could, giving vague answers about dating someone older, someone from outside our usual social circle. But Chloe had known me too long to be satisfied with evasions. Older how? Like graduate student older or actually older? She pressed. Actually older, I admitted reluctantly. How much older? And why all the secrecy? Usually you tell me everything. It's complicated, Chloe. Really complicated. But I'm happier than I've been in a long time. Can't that be enough for now? She studied my face carefully and I could see her trying to piece together the puzzle. It's not some professor, is it? Because Tyler, if you're sleeping with a faculty member, it's not a professor, I interrupted quickly. And it's not what you're thinking. This is real, Chloe. More real than anything I felt with Mason. The mention of Mason's name seemed to trigger something in her expression. Tyler, please tell me you're not doing something stupid to get back at Mason. Please tell me this isn't some elaborate revenge plot. It started that way, I admitted, but it's not anymore. What I feel for him is genuine. What he feels for me is genuine. The rest of the world can have opinions, but we know what we have. But keeping our relationship secret was becoming increasingly difficult, especially as my feelings for Ryan deepened. I found myself wanting to share him with my friends, wanting to post photos of us together, wanting to hold his hand in public without looking over my shoulder. The pressure reached a breaking point the day Mason cornered me after our shared sociology class. I'd been checking my phone, smiling at a text from Ryan about dinner plans, when Mason appeared beside my desk. You seem happy lately, Tyler, he said, his tone deceptively casual. New boyfriend? Maybe, I replied, not looking up from packing my backpack. Anyone I know? Mason pressed, and something in his voice made me glance up. His expression was calculating, suspicious. I doubt it. We don't exactly run in the same circles anymore. Mason leaned against my desk, clearly not intending to let me leave easily. It's funny, you know, I've been asking around, trying to figure out who's been putting that spring in your step. None of our mutual friends have seen you with anyone. It's almost like you're dating a ghost. My heart started pounding, but I forced my voice to remain steady. Maybe I've just gotten better at keeping my private life private. Maybe I learned from dating you that not everything needs to be performed on social media. Mason's eyes flashed with anger at the dig, but he quickly composed himself. Or maybe you're seeing someone you shouldn't be seeing, someone whose identity you need to hide. What's that supposed to mean? I don't know yet, Mason said, standing up straight. But I will figure it out. And Tyler? If you're doing something to embarrass me or my family, there will be consequences. As he walked away, I felt a chill run down my spine. Mason had always been vindictive, but there was something different about his tone, something more dangerous than his usual petty threats. That evening, I told Ryan about the confrontation while we cooked dinner together in his kitchen. He listened carefully, his expression growing more serious as I described Mason's suspicious questions and thinly veiled threats. He's getting close to the truth, Ryan said finally, seasoning the chicken we were preparing. Maybe it's time we talked about what happens when he finds out." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Ryan turned to face me fully, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. "Tyler, what we have is real and important to me. But when Mason discovers we're together, and he will discover it, there's going to be fallout. For both of us. But especially for you. College social dynamics can be brutal, and this situation, it's going to provide a lot of ammunition for people who want to hurt you. Are you saying we should stop?" The words came out smaller than I'd intended, betraying how much the thought terrified me. "No," Ryan said firmly, pulling me into his arms. "I'm saying we need to be prepared. And I'm saying that when the time comes, I'm going to choose you over maintaining family peace. You should know that going in." I buried my face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "I choose you too, Ryan. Whatever happens, I choose you." But as we held each other in his kitchen, both of us knew that our secret world was living on borrowed time. The question wasn't if Mason would discover our relationship. It was when and how much damage he'd try to do when he did. That night, as I lay in Ryan's arms listening to his steady breathing, I tried to memorize the peace of this moment. Soon our private bubble would burst, and we'd have to face the consequences of falling in love with each other. But for now, in the darkness of his bedroom, with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, I allowed myself to believe that love would be enough to carry us through whatever storm was coming. I had no idea how naive that hope would prove to be. The text message from Mason arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting in Ryan's office, sharing coffee and planning our weekend. The sound of my phone buzzing made both of us look up from the case files. Ryan had been explaining to me his way of sharing his work life since I'd expressed genuine interest in his legal career. "Family dinner this Sunday," the message read. "Both of you will be there. Mom's house, 6 p.m. Don't even think about making excuses." My hand started shaking as I read the words aloud to Ryan. His expression grew grim, the same look I'd seen when he prepared for difficult court cases. "He knows," I whispered, though we'd both been expecting this moment for weeks. "Yes," Ryan confirmed quietly. "The question is how much he knows and what he plans to do with the information." "Ryan, we don't have to go. We could just not show up." He reached across his desk and took my trembling hands in his steady ones. "Tyler, if we run from this, Mason wins. He gets to control the narrative, tell whatever story he wants about us to the family. If we face this head on, at least we get to speak for ourselves. But your mother, God, Ryan, what is she going to think? Her son dating his other son's ex-boyfriend. This is going to destroy your family." Ryan stood up and came around his desk, pulling me into his arms. "My family will have to accept that I'm an adult who makes his own choices. And if they can't accept you, someone who makes me happier than I've been in years, then maybe they're not the family I thought they were." Sunday evening arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. I changed clothes 4 times before settling on khakis and a button-down shirt, trying to look respectable and mature while fighting the urge to hide under my covers instead. Ryan picked me up from campus, and the drive to his childhood home was filled with tense silence, broken only by his occasional reassuring touches on my hand. The Harrison family home was exactly what I'd expected. A large colonial in the historic district with perfectly manicured landscaping and the kind of architectural details that spoke of old money and established social standing. My stomach churned as we pulled into the circular driveway, knowing that in a few minutes everything would change forever. "Whatever happens in there," Ryan said as he turned off the engine, "remember that I love you. Remember that this is real, what we have. Don't let Mason's drama make you forget that." "I love you too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Mason's car was already there, along with another vehicle I didn't recognize. As we approached the front door, it opened before we could knock, revealing Mason with an expression of barely contained glee. He was dressed casually but expensively, clearly comfortable in his childhood home in a way that made my own presence feel like an intrusion. "Dad, Tyler," he said with mock politeness. "So glad you could make it. Mom's in the dining room setting the table. Jennifer's here too. I thought she should meet the family properly." The mention of Jennifer, the secretary he'd left me for, felt like a deliberate provocation. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he simply nodded and guided me toward the dining room with a protective hand on my back. Martha Harrison was every inch the elegant Southern hostess I remembered from previous family gatherings. though tonight there was a tension around her eyes that suggested she sensed something was wrong. She was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, and the dining room table was set for 6 with her best china and silver. "Ryan. Tyler," she said with warm but slightly confused hospitality. "How lovely to see you both. Tyler. I have to say I was surprised when Mason said you'd be joining us tonight. I thought you boys had, well, I thought things had ended between you." "They did, Mom," Mason said as he entered the dining room with Jennifer clinging to his arm. She was exactly what I'd expected. Blonde, conventionally pretty, with the kind of vacant smile that suggested limited intellectual curiosity. "But Tyler and Dad have become quite close lately. Haven't you?" The way Mason said it made my skin crawl. There was nothing subtle about his implication, and I could see Martha trying to process what he was suggesting. "Close?" Martha repeated, looking between Ryan and me with growing confusion. Ryan stepped closer to me, and I could feel his resolve strengthening. "Mom, Tyler and I have been seeing each other. Romantically." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha's hand went to her throat in a gesture of shock, while Jennifer's mouth fell open in undisguised surprise. Only Mason looked satisfied, clearly enjoying the chaos he'd orchestrated. "Seeing each other?" Martha's voice was faint. "Ryan, what do you mean exactly?" "I mean, we're dating, Martha," I said, finding my voice despite the way my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Ryan and I are in a relationship." "But you're Mason's—" Martha started, then stopped, clearly struggling to find appropriate words. "Ex-boyfriend," Mason finished helpfully. "Tyler is my ex-boyfriend who apparently decided to console himself by seducing my father. Isn't that right, Tyler?" "That's not how it happened," Ryan said sharply before I could respond. "Tyler didn't seduce anyone. We developed feelings for each other naturally, as adults do." "Adults?" Mason laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Mom, Tyler is 22 years old. Dad is 42. He's barely older than I am. And Dad is dating him. How is that not completely inappropriate?" Martha sank into one of the dining chairs, clearly overwhelmed. "Ryan, please tell me this is some kind of joke. Please tell me you're not actually dating your son's ex-boyfriend." "I'm not joking, Mom," Ryan replied firmly. "Tyler and I are together, and I'm not apologizing for that. Age is just a number when both people are consenting adults." "Age is just a number?" Mason's voice rose incredulously. "What will people think? What will your colleagues say? What will our family friends think when they find out you're sleeping with someone who used to sleep in my bed?" "That's enough." Ryan's voice took on the commanding tone I'd heard him use in his law practice. "You don't get to speak about Tyler that way." "I'll speak about him however I want," Mason shot back. "He's a gold-digging little—" "Finish that sentence and you can leave," Ryan interrupted, stepping protectively in front of me. "I'm a gold digger?" I finally found my voice, anger overriding my nervousness. "Mason, you left me for Jennifer here. You spread lies about me on social media. You tried to destroy my reputation because your ego couldn't handle being the one who got dumped. I didn't seek out your father for revenge. What happened between us is real." "Real?" Mason scoffed. "You expect anyone to believe that this isn't just elaborate payback? That you actually care about my father and aren't just using him to get back at me?" "I do care about him," I said firmly. "More than I ever cared about you, if you want the complete truth. Ryan treats me with respect, listens when I talk, cares about my thoughts, and means, he's everything you never were." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I could see Mason's face reddening with rage. Martha looked like she might faint, while Jennifer seemed to be enjoying the drama despite trying to look scandalized. "This is disgusting," Mason spat. "Both of you should be ashamed of yourselves. Mom, surely you can't support this perversion." "It's not perversion," Ryan said quietly but firmly. "It's love. Something you might understand if you ever thought about anyone besides yourself." Martha finally found her voice, though it was shaky. "Ryan, I don't understand this. How could you put our family in this position? What will people say when they find out?" "People will say whatever they're going to say regardless," Ryan replied. "But Tyler makes me happy, Mom, happier than I've been since my divorce. I thought my family would want that for me." "Not like this," Martha whispered. "Not with your son's ex-boyfriend." "Ryan, This will destroy our reputation in this town. The pain in Ryan's eyes was evident, but his voice remained steady. If our reputation matters more than my happiness, then maybe I've misunderstood what family means. Mason seemed to sense his opportunity. Choose, Dad. Him or us. You can't have both. Ryan didn't hesitate. Then I choose Tyler. The finality of his statement sent Mason into a rage. Fine, but don't expect me to be part of this sick little fantasy. And don't expect Mom to pretend this is normal. He grabbed Jennifer's hand and headed for the door. Come on, Jen. Let's leave them to their perverted little relationship. Mason, wait, Martha called after him. But he was already gone, the front door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, Martha began to cry, quiet, dignified tears that somehow felt worse than if she'd screamed at us. Ryan, how could you do this to our family? I fell in love, Mom, Ryan said softly. I didn't plan it, didn't expect it, but it happened. And I won't apologize for finding happiness. Martha looked at me with something between pity and disgust. Tyler, I don't understand why you would do this. You're so young, you could have anyone. Why Ryan? Why this family? Because he's a good man, I replied simply. Because he makes me feel valued and loved in ways I never knew were possible. Because when I look at him, I see my future. She shook her head slowly. I need time to process this. I think you should both go. As we prepared to leave, Martha's next words stopped us at the door. Ryan, I love you. You're my son, and that will never change. But I can't support this. I can't pretend to understand or approve of this relationship. The drive back to Ryan's apartment was silent, both of us processing the emotional carnage we'd just experienced. When we finally made it inside, Ryan poured 2 glasses of wine with shaking hands, and we sat on his couch staring out at the city lights. I'm sorry, I whispered finally. I'm sorry I caused this rift in your family. Ryan pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me tightly. Tyler, look at me. You didn't cause anything. Mason's selfishness and my mother's concern about social standing caused this. You and I just fell in love. But was it worth it? I asked, voicing the fear I'd been carrying all evening. Was I worth losing your family? Ryan cupped my face in his hands, his eyes intense and certain. Tyler, you are worth everything. Every difficult conversation, every judgment, every relationship that can't survive our love. You are worth all of it and more. As he kissed me with desperate tenderness, I tried to believe him, but in the back of my mind I couldn't shake Martha's tears or Mason's rage, and I wondered if love alone would be enough to sustain us through the storm we just unleashed. The aftermath of Sunday's family dinner hit us like a tidal wave. By Monday morning, Mason had apparently shared selective details of our relationship with key people in his social circle, and by Tuesday the gossip had spread throughout the university like wildfire. I couldn't walk across campus without feeling eyes on me, hearing whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I passed. Is it true? Chloe confronted me at our usual study spot in the library. Are you actually dating Mason's father? Her voice was a mixture of shock, concern, and something that might have been admiration for the sheer audacity of it. I looked around at the other students nearby, all of whom were clearly listening despite pretending to read. Can we talk about this somewhere private? We ended up in Chloe's car in the parking garage, where I finally told her everything from my initial plan for revenge to the genuine love that had developed between Ryan and me. She listened without interruption, her expression cycling through disbelief, concern, and finally something approaching understanding. Tyler, this is either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or the most catastrophically stupid, she said when I finished. I'm honestly not sure which. Probably both, I admitted. But Chloe, what I feel for him is real. More real than anything I ever felt for Mason. I can see that, she said softly. The way you talk about him, you light up. But honey, the fallout from this is going to be brutal. Mason is telling everyone who'll listen that you seduced his father as revenge. Some people are calling you a gold digger. Others are saying it's disgusting. There's even a rumor that Ryan is having a midlife crisis and you're taking advantage. Each word felt like a physical blow, but I tried to keep my voice steady. What do you think? Chloe was quiet for a long moment. I think you're one of the most genuinely good people I know, and I think anyone who makes you this happy can't be all bad. But Tyler, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? Meanwhile, Ryan was facing his own challenges at the law firm. His senior partner, James Morrison, called him into a closed-door meeting Wednesday afternoon. Ryan told me about it that evening as we sat in his apartment, both of us picking at the dinner we'd barely touched. James said the rumors about us are concerning from a professional standpoint, Ryan recounted, running his hands through his hair in the stress gesture I'd come to recognize. Apparently, some clients have expressed discomfort about being represented by someone involved in what they see as a scandal. My stomach twisted with guilt. Ryan, maybe we should. Don't, he interrupted firmly. Don't suggest we should end this. Tyler, I've worked my entire adult life to build my career, but I won't sacrifice my personal happiness to maintain other people's comfort with my choices. But if it costs you clients, if it hurts your reputation, then I'll build new client relationships with people who judge me based on my legal skills rather than my love life. Ryan moved to sit beside me, taking my hands in his. Tyler, I've been successful for 20 years. I have savings, investments, a solid reputation built on winning cases. I can weather this storm. Thursday brought Martha's attempt at reconciliation, or perhaps intervention. She called Ryan and asked if she could take me to lunch, just the two of us. Ryan was hesitant, but I agreed, hoping that maybe I could help heal some of the family damage. We met at a quiet restaurant across town, away from places where we might encounter people from Ryan's social or professional circles. Martha looked elegant as always, but I could see the strain around her eyes, the careful way she held herself as if she might break apart if she relaxed. Tyler, she began once we'd ordered, I want you to know that I don't dislike you personally. You've always been polite and thoughtful during family gatherings, but I'm struggling to understand this situation. I know it's complicated, I replied carefully. I know it must be difficult for you. It is difficult. Ryan is my son, and seeing him happy should be my only concern. But Tyler, he's 20 years older than you. When you're 30, he'll be 50. When you're 40, he'll be 60. Have you thought about what that means for a long-term relationship? I had thought about it extensively. Martha, I understand the age difference seems significant now, but I'm not dating Ryan's age. I'm dating Ryan. His intelligence, his kindness, his passion for justice, the way he makes me laugh, those things don't have expiration dates. Martha studied me carefully. And you don't think this has anything to do with Mason? You don't think maybe you're confusing genuine attraction with a desire to hurt him? I won't lie and say it didn't start that way, I admitted. But Martha, if this was just about Mason, I would have made sure he found out immediately. I would have flaunted it, made it as public and humiliating as possible. Instead, Ryan and I kept our relationship private for months, because we wanted to protect what we were building. But you can't keep it private forever, Martha pointed out. And when people find out, when they are finding out, it reflects on all of us. Ryan's career, our family's reputation in this community. I'm sorry about that, I said sincerely. I never wanted to cause problems for your family, but I can't be sorry for falling in love with your son. Martha was quiet for a long time, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Tyler, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Do you see a real future with Ryan? Rare as children, growing old together, or is this an exciting adventure that you'll outgrow when someone more age-appropriate comes along? The question hit deeper than I'd expected because it forced me to articulate feelings I'd been afraid to examine too closely. Martha, when I imagine my future, really imagine it, Ryan is there. I see us traveling together, him showing me the places he's been, me painting scenes from our adventures. I see lazy Sunday mornings and challenging conversations about books and art. I see growing older with someone who respects my mind as much as he cares for my heart. And children? Martha pressed. Ryan already has a son. Do you want children of your own someday? Maybe. But if we decide we want children, there are options. Adoption, surrogacy. And if we decide we don't want children, that's okay too. Martha, I'm not dating Ryan's potential as a father. I'm dating Ryan as a partner, a companion, a love. Something in Martha's expression softened slightly. You really do love him, don't you? More than I knew was possible, I confirmed. And he loves you? Yes. And Martha, I promise you, I would never hurt him intentionally. I would never take advantage of his feelings or use him for financial gain. What we have is real." Martha reached across the table and briefly covered my hand with hers. "Tyler, I may not understand this relationship and I may never fully approve of it, but I can see that you genuinely care for my son. And if you make him happy, well, perhaps that's what matters most." It wasn't complete acceptance, but it was a start. Friday brought the news that Mason had escalated his campaign against us. He'd apparently contacted some of Ryan's biggest clients, sharing his version of our relationship story and suggesting that Ryan's personal instability might affect his professional judgment. 2 clients had requested to be transferred to other lawyers in the firm. "That's it," Ryan said when he told me about Mason's interference. His voice was calm, but I could see the fury burning behind his eyes. I was willing to let Mason have his tantrum and work through his feelings, but actively trying to destroy my career crosses every line. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have a conversation with my son about consequences," Ryan replied grimly. The conversation took place Saturday afternoon at Mason's apartments. Ryan insisted I come with him, saying this concerned both of us. Mason answered the door in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, clearly not expecting visitors. "Dad, Tyler," he said with false casualness. "What brings you to my humble apartment?" "Your interference with my law practice," Ryan said without preamble. "You contacted my clients, Mason. You tried to damage my professional relationships." Mason shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. "I thought they should know what kind of man they're trusting with their legal needs. Someone with such poor judgment in his personal life might not be the best choice professionally." "Mason, you're jealous and acting like a child," Ryan said firmly. "But when you attack my career, you've gone too far." "Too far?" Mason laughed bitterly. "Dad, you're sleeping with my ex-boyfriend. You've made our family a laughingstock. What did you expect me to do? Throw you a congratulations party?" "I expected you to act like an adult," Ryan replied. "I expected you to respect that I'm entitled to find happiness wherever I can, just like you did when you left Tyler for Jennifer." "That's completely different," Mason protested. "How?" I spoke up for the first time. "How is it different, Mason? You ended our relationship. You moved on immediately. Why am I not allowed to do the same?" "Because you moved on with my father," Mason shouted. "It's sick and twisted and wrong." "It's love," Ryan said quietly. "Something you might recognize if you'd ever experienced it yourself instead of just using people for your convenience." The words hung in the air like a slap. Mason's face went through several emotions: anger, hurt, and finally something that looked almost like recognition. "Get out," he said finally. "Both of you, get out and don't come back." As we walked back to Ryan's car, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The bridges were burned now, completely and irrevocably. But somehow, that felt cleaner than the toxic uncertainty we'd been living with. "I'm sorry," I said as Ryan drove us home. "I'm sorry it came to this with Mason." "I'm not," Ryan replied, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Tyler, I spent years making excuses for Mason's selfishness, trying to maintain a relationship with a son who only cared about me when it was convenient for him. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending we had the father-son relationship I always wanted and accepted the reality of who he is." 6 months later, our relationship had weathered the worst of the storm. Ryan's law practice had actually grown. Turns out there were plenty of potential clients who respected his integrity and skill more than they cared about gossip. Some of Ryan's old clients did leave, but they were replaced by new ones who appreciated his honesty and dedication. Martha and I had developed an unlikely friendship built on our shared love for Ryan and her gradual recognition that our relationship was built on genuine affection rather than manipulation or revenge. She still had moments of discomfort about the age difference, but she'd stopped questioning our commitment to each other. Mason had maintained his silence and distance, which was probably the best outcome we could have hoped for. Through mutual friends, we'd heard he was engaged to Jennifer, and I felt nothing but indifference about the news. "Do you ever regret it?" Ryan asked one evening as we sat on his balcony watching the sunset over the city. "The drama, the judgment, the family complication?" I thought about the question seriously, considering everything we'd been through. "Sometimes I regret the pain it caused other people," I said finally. "But regret falling in love with you? Never." Ryan pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Good. Because Tyler, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I plan to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. As I settled into his arms, watching the sky turn purple and gold, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most extraordinary destinations. What had started as a plan for revenge had become the greatest love story of my life, and no amount of judgment or family drama could change that simple, beautiful truth. Love had won after all.